Congratulations, you finally have a haircut that matches your age. That note, pinned to my silk pillowcase, felt like a cruel joke on the single most important day of my autumn years. I jolted awake, the sunlight already streaming through the master's suite window, bathing the luxurious room in a deceptive, golden glow. My hand flew to my head, and I inhaled sharply. My scalp was a slick, cold plain, radiating a stinging burn where antiseptic still lingered. The shock was physical, a deep, jarring vibration that ran through the core of my 82-year-old body. I didn't scream, didn't shatter into the tears they clearly wanted. Instead, I moved with the cold, practiced efficiency of a woman who had built an empire from dust. My gaze locked on the bedroom safe. It was still open from the night before, awaiting the planned, catastrophic transfer. I reached in, not for the hairbrush I suddenly didn't need, but for the heavy manila envelope containing the paperwork to transfer $22 million. A fortune, the culmination of 7 decades of relentless work, meant to be a gift. That's when I changed the game. I walked on autopilot into the marble-tiled bathroom. The woman who stared back from the ornate mirror was not Eleanor Vance, the legendary Boston property developer who had shaped the city's skyline with dozens of glass and steel towers. She was a shell, violated, stripped down to raw, shaking fury. The thick, silvery platinum hair, my signature, my crown of pride that had earned me the moniker, the Silver Fox, in boardrooms, was entirely gone. All that remained was a burning, unervingly smooth scalp, a violent, clinical red beneath the morning light. A surge of tears attacked the back of my throat, but I brutally choked them back. They wanted to see me crumble. They wanted me to be too humiliated to attend the wedding of my only son, Michael, a day when a mother should stand tallest. No, I wasn't giving Sabrina that cheap, nasty victory. My eyes swept the room and caught sight of a small, ivory envelope resting on the mahogany nightstand. Neat, almost childish blue script, too perfectly written to look genuine. Have a great day at my wedding. A crude, heart-shaped doodle sealed the note. The paper still faintly carried the heavy, expensive scent of gardenia noir, the exact fragrance I had smelled on my future daughter-in-law 100 times. I didn't need to guess who held the razor. I took a long, stabilizing breath. My body was trembling, yes, but my mind had never been clearer, sharper. The bedroom safe remained a silent, metallic witness. The paperwork for the $22 million transfer to Michael and Sabrina, the gift I'd meticulously prepared for weeks, foolishly believing it was the final, expensive bridge to keep my son close, felt different now. The thick paper wasn't smooth. It felt razor-sharp in my grip, an indictment cutting into my palm. I carefully placed the envelope back, turned the dial with a slow, deliberate twist, and listened to the dry, mechanical click of the lock engaging. The decision was final. That $22 million was never leaving the safe. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of Arthur Whitman, our family attorney and my counsel for over 30 years. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm, professional. "Eleanor, ready to sign off on the transfer? I've prepped every single detail as you requested." I forced my voice to remain level, devoid of the earthquake still raging inside me. "Arthur, put it all on hold. Not a single cent moves. And tonight, immediately after the reception, I want you at the estate. We are rewriting the entire will, top to bottom." A pause, thick and unsettling, hung on the line. Is something terribly wrong, Eleanor?" I closed my eyes, the cold, smooth contact of the receiver against my cheek a strange comfort. "Just one thing, Arthur," I stated, allowing a thread of steel to enter my voice. I finally woke up. I set the phone down with a decisive thud and walked to the colossal mahogany wardrobe. My physical tremor continued, but a small, fiery ember had ignited in my chest. Sabrina might have mutilated my hair, but she could not strip away the formidable will and pride I had painstakingly honed over decades of bare-knuckle capitalism. I pulled a classic, navy silk sheath dress from the hanger, the very one I'd purchased for my 75th birthday after closing a massive 35-story tower deal in the financial district. I smoothed the cool, heavy fabric, remembering that intoxicating sensation of unassailable victory. I realized I needed this dress today, not merely as an outfit, but as armor for the war that had just been declared. The landline, an anachronism I kept for private calls, suddenly rang, making me jump. Not Michael, not Sabrina. It was Lucinda, my stylist for over 20 years. My throat tightened with emotion, but I kept my tone even, professional. Lucinda, I need you right now. Bring the best, most discreet silver wig you possess. No one, and I mean no one, can know what happened. She didn't pry, didn't utter a word of pity. She simply whispered, "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Eleanor. Don't move." While I waited, I settled into the high-backed armchair by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the private gardens under the first, tentative dusting of snow. White, ethereal flakes drifted down, silently cloaking every branch, every red brick path I had walked 1,000 times. Memories, sharp and unbidden, flooded my mind. The day I became a widow at 40. The agonizing night I buried my husband, William, with my 18-year-old son, Michael, asleep in my exhausted arms. In that darkness, I had sworn a solemn vow. He would never know fear, never know the gnawing hunger of want. I had kept that vow for 42 years. Dawn-breaking runs to construction sites, sleepless nights poring over complex contracts until my vision blurred, the first meager apartment building, then a commercial plaza, and finally, those soaring skyscrapers. Every brick, every clause, was tied directly to my blood, my relentless sweat, and my agonizing sleepless nights. And now, all of it was poised to fall into the hands of a cold-eyed woman who saw me as nothing more than a disposable relic. The doorbell chimed, a discreet, low sound. I let Lucinda in. She carried a long, expensive-looking black box. When she saw my exposed scalp, her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with undisguised horror. "Oh my God, Eleanor. That's awful." I cut off her impending flood of pity with a tight, unyielding smile. "No questions, Lucinda. Just help me stand tall in front of people today. Help me look like me." It took the better part of an hour to carefully fit the exquisite, soft silver-gray wig. It moved, it shone, it behaved exactly like my real hair, only thicker, more perfectly styled. When Lucinda finally held up the tall, trifold mirror, I shivered. The woman reflected in the glass was no longer the violated, shaking wreck from the early morning. She possessed the cool, unshakable poise and razor-sharp gaze that had once made my most aggressive male counterparts in business respectfully retreat. I recognized her. This was Eleanor Vance, the woman who had never, ever accepted defeat. I thanked Lucinda, slipped a thick envelope of cash into her hand, and saw her out. Alone again, I retrieved my purse and carefully tucked a minuscule voice recorder deep inside. My instincts, honed over decades of negotiating ruthless deals, screamed that today, words alone would not be enough. Proof was my only weapon. The antique clock on the mantelpiece read 10 a.m. 3 hours until the ceremony at the historic St. Bartholomew's Church, one of the city's oldest and most prestigious. I closed my eyes and drew a long, stabilizing breath. The battle had begun this morning, the instant my hand connected with that bare, burning scalp. But the ending? That would be entirely mine to write. I grabbed a tailored, gray wool coat and the plush cashmere scarf Michael had given me 10 years ago. That memory now felt like a dull, grating knife, scratching, not yet drawing blood, but promising pain. I delivered a silent, firm message to the man I loved most, my son. "Today I will show you precisely how grievously you misjudged your mother's will." When I stepped outside, the sharp, cold Boston wind slapped my face, but I didn't flinch. I pulled the coat collar high, subtly adjusted the new wig, and slid into the back of my town car. My driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, ready to offer a greeting. I gently shook my head. I needed absolute silence. I needed to feed the white-hot fire that had just been sparked. En route to the church, I watched people through the tinted window, elderly couples holding hands, young families shepherding small children across the crosswalks. I wondered how many of them had been brutally betrayed by the very people they had poured their trust into. How many had been forced to choose between the illusion of love and the necessity of self-respect. I realized that today, I wasn't fighting solely for myself, but for the countless mothers who are used and discarded by their own children, their lifetime of motherhood callously thrown back at them as a mere demand. The car gently pulled to a stop outside the grand church gates. I pressed a manicured hand to my chest and felt a strange, deep calm, no trembling, only a cold, powerful strength rising. The strength of truth. The unwavering resolve of a woman pushed violently to the very edge, who profoundly refused to break. I opened the car door, stepped out, and allowed a small, private smile to form. That smile wasn't for the arriving crowd, for Michael, or for Sabrina. It was for me. For Eleanor Vance, who had woken up on the most important morning of her life with a shaved head and a heart more ruthlessly awake than it had ever been. I settled onto the cold, hard pew, gazing up at the magnificent stained glass windows flickering with the gathering light. While the church staff scurried about, placing floral arrangements and lighting candles, my mind drifted back to the genesis of it all. Love, devastating loss, and the sheer, unyielding grit required to forge a life from absolute nothing. I vividly recalled the turning point when I was 40. They handed me my husband William's death certificate, a sudden, violent heart attack on a deserted highway. I was utterly paralyzed. One minute we were animatedly discussing the modest expansion of our tiny real estate office. The next, I was frozen in a white hospital corridor, my palms pressed hard against my face, hearing my 18-year-old son Michael ask in a small, breaking voice, "Mom, where's Dad?" I had no answer. I simply pulled Michael into a fierce, protective embrace, holding him tightly and silently, fiercely swore that he would never, ever want for anything again. We returned to our relatively small, unassuming house just outside the Boston metro area. That night, I sat for hours in an old, leather armchair, watching Michael, now a young man, finally asleep on the sofa, his handsome face still streaked with silent tears. In that suffocating darkness, I reached a primal, chilling understanding. From that moment forward, the crushing weight was mine, and mine alone. No William to share the agonizing burden of bills, no strong shoulder to lean on, only me and a son who hadn't yet learned how to tie his corporate tie. The following morning, as the sun reluctantly lifted over the eastern horizon, I pulled on a thin, threadbare sweater, tied back my thick hair, and started my new life. The grief-stricken widow had transformed into the accidental businesswoman. I possessed no initial capital, no specialized business knowledge beyond basic bookkeeping. But I possessed one non-negotiable asset, a terrifying, absolute need to survive for my son. I taught myself to read complex financial statements as if they were a foreign language. I spent endless hours at the public library, obsessively studying property law, land use, commercial management, and market analysis. At first, the dense numbers and foreign jargon spun uncontrollably in my head, threatening to overwhelm me, but page after relentless page, hope began to bloom. I realized that knowledge would be the sharpest knife protecting us from the crushing certainty of poverty. Those first 3 years were a sustained, brutal war. I worked from 5 a.m. until long past midnight. My days were spent knocking on the doors of weary old houses, desperately pitching my low-cost brokerage services, and my nights were bent over notes, learning intricate market analyses, price comparisons, and cold-calling hostile leads. Some nights I would quietly weep into my pillow after another harsh rejection, only to drag myself out of bed at dawn to prepare Michael's breakfast and drive him to college. I often went hungry, smiling brightly, saving every dollar for his tuition fees and required textbooks. When Michael, always observant, asked, "Mom, why aren't you eating with me?" I would simply smile, the smile a secret shield, and lie, "I already ate, sweetheart. You go ahead." He believed me, and I doubled down on the sacrifice. I desperately needed him to grow up feeling secure, absolutely privileged, unlike my own childhood spent desperately digging through empty, echoing cupboards for the last stale crust of bread. 3 years later, I bought my first duplex, signing the stack of legal papers with a hand that shook so violently I could barely grip the pen. When I finally put the pen down, a massive, new door violently slammed open. From that moment, it was building by building, unit by unit, towering structure after towering structure. The Vance real estate footprint began not with a silver spoon, but with freezing morning walks to a hostile broker's office, a permanently sore throat from countless cold calls, and nights illuminated only by a harsh desk lamp over burning, exhausted eyes. Michael, however, saw only the final, glorious result, never the agonizing, life-draining process. By the time he graduated college, he was accustomed to a new luxury car every few years, his tuition fully paid without question, never once considering the price tag of a shirt or a vacation. I had successfully raised him like a prince, but in my desperate attempt to compensate for his father's loss, I had critically forgotten to teach the prince how to wield a sword and fight his own battles. On his graduation day, watching him confidently stride across the stage, his black robe billowing dramatically, I swelled with pride. I truly believed I had succeeded, that I had transformed a fatherless boy into a successful, secure man. But deep within his confident eyes, I recognized a familiar, unsettling trait. It wasn't profound gratitude, it was an ingrained, absolute entitlement. At 25, he came to me, cool as ice, and stated, "Mom, I need my own luxury condo. You'll cover the down payment, right?" I simply nodded, wrote the massive check, and asked no questions. It wasn't the first such demand, and I knew with a sinking heart it wouldn't be the last. At 30, he brought Sabrina home and announced flatly, "We want a European honeymoon, extremely luxurious and long. You'll take care of all the expenses, right?" It wasn't a humble request, it was a clear, smiling order. I had thoroughly, utterly spoiled my son. I told myself I was making up for his father being taken too soon. In the brutal truth, I was simply training him to treat his mother's profound love like an endlessly replenishing ATM. I realized my catastrophic error far too late. Then Sabrina arrived, and everything accelerated for the worse. From the very first moment, I felt the chilling, calculating assessment in her eyes. She was a smooth talker, excellent at charming a room with fashionable talk of luxury travel, designer clothes, and grand career plans. But when she looked directly at me, it was always a cold, surgical scrutiny. Zero genuine interest in the powerful woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her fiancé. I initially dismissed it, foolishly telling myself that time and shared moments would soften her sharp edges. Instead, I was systematically pushed to the extreme margins of their life. At family dinners, she would casually toss out devastatingly light jabs. "Mrs. Vance, don't you find that color ages you terribly? Perhaps you should try something much fresher." Michael would simply laugh, nodding along like her subservient shadow. I would sit there, quietly eating my salad, forcing a rigid smile to prevent the table from erupting into a bitter battlefield. Each dinner was another small, invisible scar etched onto my heart. I kept handing over the money, kept my mouth shut, because I was paralyzed by one overriding, terrifying fear, losing my only son. I clung to the desperate, false hope that if I was simply more generous, if I gave them more, Michael might finally remember the boundless, selfless nature of a mother's love. That suicidal hope was precisely why I had prepared the massive, life-altering wedding gift, $22 million. To me, it was the last key, the hope of securing my permanent connection to Michael and finally helping Sabrina see I wasn't a financial obstacle, but a hugely wealthy, generous ally. But this brutal morning shattered that entire illusion into a million razor-sharp fragments. The shaved hair, the mocking, spiteful note, everything landed like a physical, jarring slap that finally, violently woke me up. Suddenly, I could see with absolute clarity. For years, I had traded my health, my remaining youth, and my core self-respect to cling desperately to a familial bond that was already deeply, irredeemably rotten. Sitting in the quiet church, listening to the choir's final, somber rehearsal, I lightly touched the elegant wig on my head. It felt soft and entirely natural, perfectly concealing an ugly, vicious truth. But underneath, I knew my scalp still intensely burned. That wound was my entire life in miniature, a dazzling surface of undeniable, public success, but with a deep, private wound left by the very people I loved and trusted the most. I drew a deep breath. Only one colossal question remained. Would I permit them to continue defining my worth, or would I finally stand up and fiercely define myself? I remained on the dark wooden pew a moment longer, my hand gripping an old hymnal. The cold stillness of St. Bartholomew's seeped through my heavy coat, chilling me to the bone. On the main altar, helpers were lighting the final candles, their golden glow trembling up toward the high, arched ceiling. Everything looked incredibly beautiful, solemnly revered, exactly as Sabrina had obsessively demanded. But to me, that reverence was now merely the pristine backdrop for a meticulously staged, expensive farce. I rose slowly and slipped into the silent, dim side hall. My expensive heels clicked softly on the polished stone floor, the sound blending with the distant, hushed whispers of the bridesmaids ahead. My initial intention was simply to step outside for a breath of the cold, clarifying air, but then I froze completely. In the sudden, thick quiet of the stone corridor, a familiar male voice came, low and intensely urgent. It was Michael. I pressed my entire body against a massive, cold stone column carved with classical figures, forcing my already shallow breathing to slow to an almost imperceptible pace. My son's voice, hushed and strained, carried clearly in the enclosed, echoing space, each word a cold, precise slice through the silence. Tessa, no. Absolutely do not show up here now. I told you. You just need to wait until after the ceremony. That name, Tessa Park, stabbed deep into my chest. I had seen her countless times at Michael's downtown office, the young, strikingly pretty secretary with quick, intelligent eyes and a bright, almost unsettlingly permanent smile. I had always foolishly believed she was merely a dedicated, efficient assistant. Now, everything snapped into brutal clarity. Michael continued, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible whisper into his phone. As soon as I secure that money from my mother, everything will drastically change. We won't have to hide anymore, won't have to sneak around. Just be patient for a few more weeks. I felt the heavy hymnal slip from my numb lap, my hands beginning to shake violently again. Every syllable hit my ears like a final, cold steel blade. That money he spoke of was the $22 million wedding gift I had prepared. My lifetime of work was suddenly, callously transformed into an escape ticket for my son to run off with his mistress, even as he was mere hours away from marrying Sabrina. I tilted my head slightly, my heart pounding a deafening rhythm against my ribs. Michael's voice returned, heavier, almost arrogant. You know how my mother is, Tessa. She always desperately wants to please me. Always terrified I'll have to go without. As soon as she signs the final documents this afternoon, we'll have it all. A clean, fresh start. Absolute freedom. No strings, no demands. I viciously bit down on my lip, hard enough to taste copper, to prevent myself from making the smallest sound. My son, the sweet boy who once cried into my shoulder, distraught over a lost toy, now saw his mother as nothing more than an endlessly exploitable wallet. He wasn't merely betraying me, he was making an utter, public mockery of his own wedding, turning those sacred vows into a sick, elaborate joke. In that agonizing instant, I heard quick footsteps rushing down the hall. Michael instantly lowered his voice. I have to go. Keep your head down. I'll take care of everything after the honeymoon, Tessa, I promise. Trust me. Then, the call was abruptly cut off, leaving behind a thick, suffocating silence. I slipped back into the protective shadows, pretending to intently study a large, extravagant flower arrangement tucked into the corner. A few rushed church staffers hurried by, paying me no mind whatsoever. Michael stepped out from behind the imposing column, quickly straightened the lapels of his tuxedo jacket, a brief flicker of strain crossing his face before he plastered on the wide, expectant smile everyone demands from a happy groom. But I had heard and I had seen everything. I returned to my pew, sinking back down, adopting the rigid posture of a polite, proud churchgoer. Deep inside my purse, the minuscule recorder was glowing a steady, silent red, dutifully storing every single lie Michael had just uttered. My chest ached with a profound, raw pain, but something deep inside had simultaneously, permanently hardened. I no longer held onto the desperate, foolish fantasy that money could somehow mend a fundamental mother-son bond. I knew with absolute certainty that I had just secured my first piece of irrefutable evidence, the very weapon required to save me from the monstrous trap my son and future daughter-in-law were so arrogantly setting. I closed my eyes, regulating my breath. The colossal organ music swelled in rehearsal, urgent, then lingering. People were beginning to file in, seeing me as a proud, slightly old-fashioned mother waiting for her successful son to walk the aisle. But only I knew that from the instant I overheard that chilling phone call, my heart had violently shifted its entire weight from devastating hurt to unyielding resolve. When I reopened my eyes, the colored light from the magnificent stained glass fell across my clasped hands in brilliant, thick bands of green, deep red, purple, and vibrant gold. I stared at the kaleidoscope of light and thought, perhaps God is showing me the true road, not the road paved with endless tears, but the difficult, necessary road of truth. I tightened my grip on the purse where the warm, recorded evidence rested, and I made myself a final, unwavering promise. When the moment comes, I won't tremble like I did this morning. I will be Eleanor Vance, the woman who is not afraid and who is ready to expose everything. I remained on the hard wooden pew, struggling to work my breathing back into a normal rhythm after the shock of what I had just overheard. A cold, metallic ringing continued to sound deep inside my mind, a chilling warning that the full, ugly truth had not yet fully presented itself. I now knew Michael had a mistress and was only waiting for my $22 million to violently leave Sabrina. But deep in my soul, I instinctively felt that Sabrina was far from being an innocent party. She had never once bothered to conceal the condescending, disdainful look she reserved exclusively for me. I desperately wanted to know what she truly thought. I needed to see my future daughter-in-law's real face, not the polished, glowing mask she wore so flawlessly in public. I rose silently and slipped down the corridor toward the bridal prep room. The polished marble floor reflected my careful steps. At the far end of the hall, the massive oak door was sitting slightly ajar, a bright white light spilling out, along with bouncy, loud music and the sharp, brittle laughter of several young women. I stopped instantly, just outside the threshold. My heart was pounding frantically, but my feet, strangely, refused to move away. Through the small crack in the door, Sabrina's voice rang out, clear as a bell, high, utterly confident, and absolutely brimming with triumph. You know what? In just a few hours, I will officially have the entire fortune in my hands. $22 million, and by law I get half. Michael is so unbelievably naive. He has absolutely no idea what's coming. A burst of shrill, delighted laughter erupted from the room. I went completely rigid. My fingers painfully dug into the cold door frame, my palms turning to ice. Sabrina continued, her voice now lower, but edged with pure, concentrated malice. And after that, I'm filing for divorce. I've already retained an attorney. I certainly don't need to stay with Michael forever. With that kind of money, I can start a fresh, completely free, and far more comfortable life. A bridesmaid giggled. What about the mother-in-law? She's quite a handful. She acts like the house and company are her divine right. Sabrina's voice dropped, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. Don't worry about the old woman. Once the money transfer is finalized, I'll pressure Michael to put her in a high-end nursing home. Park her there. Let someone else deal with her petty complaints and overbearing manner. Once she's completely out of the house and out of the company, she won't have a single say in anything that matters. The room exploded into another round of high-pitched, crystalline laughter, sharp and sickening as blades slicing my skin. I began to shake violently, but not from fear this time. It was a pure, white-hot anger rising from the very marrow of my bones, a terrifying firestorm burning away the last vestige of the weakness I had felt that morning. I stood there, frozen, until I realized I was violently crushing the tiny recorder deep inside my purse. The red light kept blinking, faithfully, silently catching every venomous word, every bitter, ugly laugh. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second and knew that I had just gripped a double-edged knife. One edge was razor-sharp, ready to protect me, the other was poised to strike back. I eased away from the door without making a single sound. My heart was hammering as if it might explode from my chest, but my steps remained impossibly steady. I knew with absolute certainty that if I remained there for one more minute, I would charge into that room and scream Sabrina's atrocious lies directly into her face. But I didn't. Life had taught me enough. The biggest battles are not won through hot, blind rage, but through cold, calculated patience and meticulous planning. Back in the main sanctuary, no one noticed my brief absence. Guests were rapidly gathering. A low, polite chatter filled the vast air. I forced a brilliant, welcoming smile and greeted the familiar faces, expertly burying the terrifying storm twisting and churning deep inside me. In the reflective, colored glass of a side window, I caught my own brief reflection, a poised, silver-haired woman in a sophisticated navy dress with perfect, deep red lipstick. No one could possibly know that only a few agonizing steps away, I had just heard my future daughter-in-law openly call me an old woman who needed to be locked away. I sat down, my hands loosely folded in my lap. Inside my purse, the recording had become a living, breathing piece of proof. I vividly pictured it playing for the entire assembled crowd, Sabrina's smug laughter echoing mercilessly, her radiant face rapidly going pale as she realized that everything was completely exposed. The thought gave me an odd, cooling calm. Sabrina wanted me utterly erased, tucked away in some distant, sterile nursing home. Michael wanted to mercilessly drain my money and run off with his young lover. Both of them clearly believed I was weak, old, and easily beaten. But that cold, profound contempt was precisely what gave me ultimate strength. I would ruthlessly turn their perfectly constructed trap into my personal launchpad. In that instant, I knew that the morning's deep humiliation had become a definitive pivot point. From the barbaric shaved scalp and the spiteful, cowardly note, to the false vows I overheard behind the column, and finally to the vicious, triumphant laughter in the bridal room, together, they formed a complete, irrefutable indictment to which I didn't need to add a single word. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment. I drew a deep, cleansing breath and looked toward the magnificent altar. The candlelight softly washed the stone face of the Virgin Mary. Quietly, I told myself, they mistakenly think I've already lost. They have absolutely no idea I've just begun. I straightened my expensive shawl, sat impossibly tall, and allowed a gentle, perfect smile to return to my lips. Anyone passing by would see only a kind, proud mother of the groom on the biggest day of her life. But only I knew that behind that tranquil smile, a double-edged blade was carefully poised, and when I finally drew it, none of them would see it coming. The ancient church bells began to peal, each loud, resonant round rolling through the vast space like a familiar, comforting refrain. Guests quickly took their seats. The white-draped pews were dotted with the deep crimson of expensive roses. I sat rigidly in the front row on the groom's side, my fingers lightly clasping the small clutch bag on my lap. All eyes instantly turned to the back of the sanctuary, where Sabrina was moments away from entering on her father's arm. The massive oak doors opened with a deep, echoing groan. She appeared in a breathtaking, white French lace gown, the colossal train trailing nearly to the steps behind her. Murmurs of awe and sharp gasps spread through the congregation. Camera flashes popped incessantly. Sabrina beamed, gliding forward like the pristine heroine in a fantasy fairy tale. I watched her, and I couldn't help but vividly recall the cruel, cold words from the dressing room just minutes before. Behind that immaculate, shimmering facade was a cold, utterly calculating heart, and I was the only person present who knew the absolute truth of it. Michael was waiting at the end of the aisle, strikingly handsome in a crisp black tuxedo with a perfectly starched white tie. His smile was wide and beaming, but to me, it was now nothing more than a grotesque mask. I heard his whisper on the phone, clear as a bell in my memory, "After I get that money from my mother, everything will change." The image of the sweet, clumsy boy who once gripped my hand, unsteady on his toddler legs, was now entirely obliterated. Standing before me was a man who had willingly sold off both his conscience and his kinship. The ceremony formally began. The priest's opening words were steady and solemn, echoing under the high, vaulted ceiling. I tried desperately to focus, but every pronouncement that marriage is a sacred union landed like a cruel, direct taunt. I glanced around the pews, teary eyes, tender smiles, people utterly convinced they were witnessing true love. Only I knew they were all watching a carefully staged, multi-million-dollar production. When it came time for the sacred vows, Michael turned to Sabrina, his voice low and seemingly steady. "I promise to love you, respect you, share every joy and sorrow with you, and be by your side for life." I bit my lip and listened, every single word carved into my memory like a newly sharpened blade. He promised eternal fidelity, yet only hours earlier, he had been whispering sweet nothings to another woman. He promised a future together while actively planning, in his head, to instantly abandon his wife the moment he secured the money. Then it was Sabrina's turn. She lifted her face, her eyes shining brilliantly as if overflowing with genuine, innocent love. "I promise to stand by you, care for you, face every challenge together, and keep this love forever." I nearly let out a derisive, short laugh. Her vows were as beautiful and empty as a poem, but in my head, I still heard the chilling clarity of her words, "I'll file for divorce." After that, the mother-in-law goes to a nursing home. The cold, scheming tone and her current, glowing, innocent face were such stark opposites that it made my skin crawl with revulsion. When the priest finally asked, in a strong, clear voice, "Does anyone object to this marriage?" for a fleeting second, my old self wanted to violently stand and shout that the entire ceremony was a calculated, heinous lie. But my new self clenched my hands tightly and held back. Not yet. The intricate trap I had already set required time and the biggest possible audience. They were the exact witnesses I wanted when the truth came out. I took a deep, stabilizing breath and managed a faint, perfect smile, the kind any loving mother would wear on such a momentous day. Finally, the bells chimed brightly, and the priest declared them husband and wife. Michael leaned down to kiss Sabrina, and the entire church erupted into a thunderous wave of applause. I clapped too, slowly, firmly, smiling the entire time. On the outside, I appeared exactly like any proud, emotional mother. Inside, every round of applause only confirmed the brutal truth. Everything I had just witnessed was an empty, disgusting show. As the newly married couple turned to walk out to the triumphant, cheerful recessional music, I rose and followed, my eyes fixed intently on the white lace train and the glossy black tuxedo. They were utterly convinced they had already won, that I was nothing more than an aging, easily manipulated mother who had been successfully pushed aside. But I knew this absolute truth. The more perfect this ceremony appeared, the harder and more publicly devastating their inevitable fall would be. I casually brushed my hand over my purse, ensuring the tiny recorder was secure. The recorded evidence was more than sufficient to fully expose every single detail. I pictured Michael's face when he realized he had been brutally found out. Sabrina's sheer panic when she heard her own cold, malicious voice ring out before a crowd of 100 influential people. A strange, glacial calm settled over me. People poured out of the church and headed toward the lavishly decorated reception hall. White flowers and expensive silk stretched everywhere. Champagne sparkled invitingly in crystal flutes. Music pulsed with a vibrant, celebratory rhythm. Guests laughed, loudly toasted, and raised their glasses in good cheer. I moved among them, completely composed, smiling broadly as I greeted familiar faces. No one could detect that behind my tranquil mask, I was calmly holding a Category 5 storm, ready to break with terrifying force. In my mind, every single step of the plan was now set. I would wait until the entire, high-profile room was completely gathered, until every person was politely attentive, their glasses lifted, waiting to hear my expected, sweet words. Then the entire elaborate structure of lies would be brutally dragged into the brightest possible light, and no one could possibly deny them. I took my seat at the lavish front table, bathed in warm golden light, and quietly watched Michael and Sabrina sitting side by side, holding hands, smiling innocently at the steady stream of guests. The sight moved many people. To me, it was nothing more than expensive makeup and elaborate masks covering total rot. I inhaled slowly and deeply and told myself, let them fully enjoy their last few moments of false glory. After that, the stage would be entirely mine. The music softened dramatically, and the murmur of conversation instantly faded into an anticipatory hush. The magnificent chandelier lights pulled into a bright, focused circle directly over the head table where Michael and Sabrina sat. My son grinned wide, his face flushed not just from wine, but from raw, confident self-satisfaction. Sabrina matched him perfectly, glowing like a bride who had just ruthlessly secured her ultimate dream. The professional master of ceremonies gently announced, and now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Eleanor Vance, the proud mother of the groom, to share a few heartfelt words on this truly special day. Every head in the room turned. Hundreds of expectant eyes landed squarely on me. My heart tightened for a single, powerful beat, then instantly steadied. This was the exact moment I had been preparing for since I first walked into the church. I stood up and slowly lifted a crystal glass of champagne. Chairs scraped against the floor, conversations instantly hushed, and all eyes focused intently on my face. I smiled the picture-perfect smile of a proud, doting mother while the terrifying storm gathered its strength. First, I want to thank every one of you for being here today to celebrate with our family. For me, this moment is profoundly sacred because I get to see my son step into a wonderful new chapter of his life. Polite applause rippled through the room. I paused, took a small, deliberate sip of the champagne, and set the glass down with a soft, audible clink. My voice dropped slightly, slow but perfectly clear and carrying. For 42 years, I have lived by one unwavering promise. Since my dear husband passed, I swore I would protect Michael with absolutely everything I possessed, to give my son a complete, secure life and never let him face the brutal want I once knew. A few soft sounds of understanding rose from the nearby tables. Some of the older, influential guests nodded, their eyes warm with sympathy. I let the sentiment hang in the air for a moment, then continued, and today, I fully intended to present my son and his beautiful new wife with a wedding gift, a truly substantial one. $22 million, the entire savings of my lifetime, the result of decades of grueling work. The vast room visibly stirred. I heard surprised murmurs, a few sharp gasps. Michael quickly squeezed Sabrina's hand, his face tightening slightly as he forced a huge, expectant smile. Sabrina's eyes lit up with pure, unmistakable avarice, her lips curling in a triumphant smirk. I drew a final, deep breath, lifted my head high, and dramatically shifted my tone. But there is one crucial thing life has taught me. Not every profound sacrifice is truly valued, and not every person genuinely deserves the gift you so freely give. The atmosphere instantly dipped. Curious, alert looks now focused intensely on me. Michael leaned forward, his mouth opening, clearly ready to interject, but I raised an imperious hand to abruptly stop him. I pulled the small, minuscule voice recorder from my purse and deliberately set it on the table. The small red light instantly blinked on. Before I finalized my decision, I announced, my voice ringing with calm authority, I think everyone here should hear a few truths. A chilling, absolute silence fell across the entire ballroom. I pressed play. Michael's distinct voice, strained and conspiratorial, instantly filled the quiet, opulent ballroom. After I get that money from my mother, everything will change. We won't have to hide anymore. Just be patient a little longer. The audio was so perfectly, chillingly clear that several guests' mouths actually fell open. Michael instantly blanched, his composure completely dissolving, and he quickly cut in. Mom, this is a terrible misunderstanding. It's completely out of context. I looked him directly, squarely in the eye, my gaze calm but utterly unyielding. A misunderstanding? Then whose mouth did these exact words come from, Michael? A wave of astonished noise instantly rose. Guests began to loudly whisper. Sabrina looked at her husband, her eyes wide with palpable alarm, then attempted to conceal her terror with a rigid, completely fake smile. I gave them no time to recover. I instantly hit the next clip on the recorder. You know how my mother is. She always desperately wants to please me. As soon as she signs this afternoon, we'll have everything. A fresh start, freedom, no strings. When the recording abruptly ended, the entire room erupted like a violently kicked beehive. Michael stammered desperately, then sprang to his feet. It was just a joke. Don't take a private conversation the wrong way. I narrowed my eyes, ruthlessly cutting through his pathetic lie. A joke, Michael? Joking about betraying a sacred marriage? Joking about treating your own mother like a disposable wallet? Michael instantly went silent, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. Sabrina attempted to clutch his shaking hand. I turned, fixing my gaze on her, my voice turning to pure ice. And Sabrina, you have a significant amount to explain, too. I pulled the small, hateful note from my purse, the nasty line I had found on my pillow that morning. Congratulations, you finally have a haircut that matches your age. Enjoy my wedding. I held it up for the nearest tables to see, a theatrical flourish of cruelty. You plan to erase me from this celebration by shaving my head in my sleep? A cheap, utterly degrading stunt? Sabrina shot up from her chair, her face flaming crimson. That's absolutely not mine. You're completely making this up for attention. I smiled a cold, pitiless smile. Really? Then why did you loudly brag in the bridal room at noon that you'd file for divorce in a few short months and take half the money? I overheard everything. And I have witnesses, if needed. The entire room froze. Some prominent guests glanced nervously at each other. Others were already whispering furiously into their phones, clearly recording the entire spectacle. Sabrina's face went utterly white, her lips trembling without sound. I let the agonizing silence stretch for a final, long moment, then slowly raised my glass one last time. Therefore, I am officially canceling the $22 million gift. Neither of you deserves a penny of the money I earned with my blood, sweat, and tears. Conversation crashed over the room like a sudden, massive wave. Michael collapsed back into his chair, his head bowed, his hand covering his defeated face. Sabrina stood ramrod straight, shaking violently with impotent rage. I ended with a final, level voice that carried clearly to the back of the room. The greatest wedding gift I can offer today is the truth. And the truth is this: greed and betrayal never win. I set the glass down with finality and turned to walk away. Chairs loudly scraped, voices rose in shock. Several sharp "oh my gods" rang out behind me, but my steps were light and completely steady. I was no longer the woman who had been trembling miserably in the mirror that morning. I was the woman who had violently stripped the masks off my son and his daughter-in-law in front of every single person who mattered. In that incredible moment, I knew I had decisively taken back control. And the game, from here on out, had only just begun. I left the tumultuous hall, my back impossibly straight, neither rushing in panic nor hesitating in regret. Each step tapped evenly on the tile floor, like a powerful, steady reminder that a colossal weight had finally lifted from my shoulders. Behind me, the chaos continued to roll, chairs dragged, people were calling out, the sounds of a wedding violently turned into a storm. I had just reached the grand lobby when I heard the frantic sound of hurried footsteps. Michael rushed up and violently grabbed my arm. The handsome, polished groom's veneer was entirely gone, replaced by pure, desperate panic and bloodshot eyes. "Mom, please don't do this. You completely misunderstood." It was all just. I stopped, turned, and met his eyes. The eyes that had once filled me with immense pride were now filled only with raw desperation. I pulled my arm free, my voice low, firm, and absolutely final. "I've heard quite enough, Michael. There is no misunderstanding." He stammered frantically for an excuse. I only said that to test her. I never meant enough. I cut him off, my voice now ringing loudly through the wide lobby. "Don't you dare try to turn your disgusting betrayal into a joke. I gave you my entire life, and this is how you repay me." Michael froze instantly, his mouth working uselessly but no words coming out. His face twisted for a moment, a tangle of raw anger and deep despair. Then, as if every ounce of strength had suddenly left him, he dropped violently to his knees, his hands clutching his head, and whispered in a broken voice, I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I didn't answer. I simply gave him one long, final look and turned away. Right at that moment, Sabrina burst out of the hall, her expensive, puffed wedding dress slowing her down, but she still lunged forward. Her face had gone a terrifying, chalky pale, her makeup starting to smear horribly, her crimson lips trembling uncontrollably. She shrieked, her voice shrill and piercing. You made that recording up. You completely ruined my wedding. Her desperate scream drew a few curious guests out into the lobby. I stood calmly, watching her snarl like a terrified, cornered animal. Ruined it. I curled a cold, dismissive smile. I only told the truth. You should be thanking me for showing everyone your real, vicious face sooner. Sabrina lunged at me, attempting to snatch the hateful note from my hand, but an older male guest quickly held her back just in time. His voice was hard and judgmental. Sabrina, calm yourself. We all clearly heard it. How can you possibly deny it? She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaking down her cheeks, all her earlier, arrogant haughtiness completely gone. In the midst of the chaos, I saw her parents step quietly outside, too. They didn't rush to their hysterical daughter. They stood frozen at the door, their eyes full of deep, profound disappointment. Her father slowly lowered his head, and her mother kept shaking hers, as if witnessing the worst humiliation of their entire lives. By then, Michael had gotten slowly to his feet, gaunt and sharp-faced, and he instantly snapped at Sabrina. You betrayed me too. You never intended to stay. She whirled back, choking up. I just wanted a better future. Her weak, pathetic excuses were instantly drowned out by the guests' angry whispers. Some shook their heads in disgust, others simply walked off without a single backward glance. I looked at the two of them, and a feeling I couldn't name rose in me. Not raw joy, not gloating, but simply relief. Profound relief that the truth was finally, fully exposed. I took a few more steps toward the exit. But behind me, Michael ran after me again. This time, his voice was not frantic, but utterly desperate. Mom, please don't abandon me. I know I was wrong. Please give me just one more chance. I'll change. I promise. I stopped, deliberately turning my back to him so he couldn't see the single, unwelcome tear that tracked down my cheek. Then I answered, slow but firm, Michael, I have given you chances your entire life. You deliberately chose to throw them all away. Now you have to live with the consequences. I didn't wait for his reply. I simply kept walking, leaving behind the heavy, choking sobs of my only son. Those first days after rewriting the will were filled with a strange, profound quiet. The big, opulent house, once echoing with Michael's demanding footsteps or Sabrina's high, shrill laughter, now held only the soft ticking of the clock and the clean sound of the wind slipping through the window. Instead of emptiness, I felt a rare, deep peace. I began the slow, deliberate process of rearranging my life. Financial files went into secure cabinets. The long, dusty rows of family photos came down from the shelves. I didn't violently throw them out. I packed them carefully into a large box and stored it deep in the back of a closet. I urgently needed new space for myself. All this time, I had been the rigorous manager, the endless sacrificer, the fierce protector. I had never truly lived for me. One crisp morning, I walked past a small, unassuming shop near the beach. A simple wooden sign hung on the clear glass door, landscape painting classes for all ages. I stood there, peering in, seeing a few women gathered around a long table, brushes in hand, focused intently on small canvases. Light streamed through the large skylight, falling over faces lined with years, but bright with genuine excitement. My heart stirred unexpectedly. I vividly remembered my 18-year-old dream to learn to paint, a dream violently buried by the overwhelming weight of making a desperate living. That very afternoon, I went back and signed up. The teacher's name was Marianne, a woman near my own age, her hair loose and gray, her voice warm and calm. She smiled kindly when I fumbled awkwardly with the brush. "No grades here, Eleanor, just joy. Let your hand lead your heart." The first lesson was seascapes. I looked out the window at the white caps breaking on the sand. I laid my first stroke onto the canvas, shy, as if learning to write again. Then, tentative patches of blue and silvery gray began to appear. The sharp, clean smell of oil paint, the feel of the bristles sliding across the rough canvas fabric, it all made me feel like a small child rediscovering the world. When I finally finished my first painting, awkward and imperfect as it was, my eyes unexpectedly stung with tears. I had given myself permission to live and breathe in a completely new way. From then on, I went every single week. I began to know the other women, most of whom had weathered profound loss. Some were widows, some estranged from their children, others quietly fighting illness. We sat side by side, painting and talking, like threads of different colors slowly weaving a new cloth. I didn't feel alone anymore. Outside of class, I often carried a folding chair to the beach near my house. In the mornings, the sea was a glassy, perfect blue. In the afternoons, sunlight intensely tipped the waves and turned the water into countless shards of sparkling glass. I sat for hours, filling page after page, letting the salty wind gently play in my short, newly growing hair. The ocean never bored me. Every day presented a new face, every moment a different shade. Like me, relearning myself, changing day by day. In the painting class, I grew especially close to a man named Samuel. He was a few years older than me, with salt and pepper hair, tall and lean. He had been a structural engineer, retiring early after his wife died of cancer. He chose painting to fill the vast emptiness. I remember the first time we sat together. He tilted his head and smiled. "I'm not particularly good at painting, Eleanor, but I'm absolutely great at ruining a canvas. That's why I sit near someone who can truly inspire me." I laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. That simple, honest line immediately eased my heart. From then on, we traded tips on color mixing and technique. One day, I accidentally smeared a corner of my canvas. Samuel leaned over. "Don't worry," he said gently. "Mistakes can easily become the focal point. My life is absolute proof of that." We laughed again, and in that shared laughter, I realized it had been an incredibly long time since my heart had felt so light. After class, Samuel often walked with me to the beach. We talked about the past, our children, and the lonely days we'd endured. He didn't pry or judge. He just listened with quiet, genuine respect. Once, I suddenly blurted out the entire story of Michael and Sabrina, the deep hurt I had just endured. I worried he would be utterly shocked or offer pity, but Samuel only nodded slowly. "I get it," he said. "Losing trust in your family can hurt far more than losing money. But you're standing here. That means you actively chose to move forward. That's worth more than any amount of money." My throat tightened. No flowery comfort. Just one short, honest sentence, and I felt completely seen. Little by little, I finally found myself again. I no longer woke up worried about what my son needed or what my daughter-in-law would criticize. I woke up to the simple task of choosing a new palette, to walking on the cold sand, to hearing Samuel talk about a bridge project he once designed. I realized life after 80 isn't an ending. It could be a profound beginning. One evening, as a fiery sunset spread intensely across the horizon, I set my brush down and looked at the painting I had just finished. In it, the sea stretched wide, the sky intensely glowed, and in the right corner, I painted a woman standing tall, her short, silver hair blowing wildly in the wind. That was me, but not the fragile, dependent Eleanor. It was the new Eleanor, free, completely at ease, finally smiling at her own reflection. I understood then. Art didn't just pull me out of the dark. It gave me a mirror for my soul. With the vast ocean, the vibrant colors, and a kind friend who knew how to truly listen, I had begun the long journey back to myself. A journey I had once never dared to imagine. Spring came late that year, and maybe that's precisely why it was so stunning. Along the winding road to the beach, endless rows of cherry trees burst open violently in the gentle breeze, pale pink petals falling softly, dusting shoulders and footsteps alike. I strolled slowly under the beautiful branches, brushing each delicate petal with my fingertips, feeling my heart warm, as if the entire universe were whispering, "It's time to begin again." The seaside house looked completely different now. The beige walls were lovingly dotted with my own paintings, from dramatic sunset seas to tranquil lavender fields. I imagined each piece was a vibrant shard of my soul, a powerful marker on the hard path where I had learned to truly love myself. I once foolishly thought hair, a dress, or a set of diamond jewelry measured my worth. Now I understood. True worth is in daring to rise from the ashes and bloom brilliantly at an age no one expects. In the mornings, I brew a pot of jasmine tea and open the window wide so the salty, clean air rolls in. I sit at the easel and lay down brighter, more vivid colors than before. No longer only heavy grays. My canvases now glow with yellow, hot pink, and sea green. It's like I'm painting myself in a late bloom season. Flowers not meant for 20-somethings, but for a seasoned heart that still stirs and still dreams. Samuel, my kind classmate from painting, still drops by often. Some days he brings a bunch of blazing red tulips, sets them gently on the table, and says, half joking, half earnest, "Late blooming flowers are still flowers, Eleanor. And they often hold their color longer." I smile, neither denying nor confirming, just allowing joy to slip into each moment. We sit quietly on the porch, watching the vast ocean, sipping coffee. He talks about structures he once designed. I talk about the years I desperately juggled ledgers and sleepless nights. Once he looked at me for a long, quiet moment and said, "You know, I've honestly never seen anyone as brave as you. Most people stay silent and simply endure. You actively chose to walk away." His words quieted something deep inside me. I didn't answer right away. I just turned to the sea where the white caps kept rolling in like steady, powerful heartbeats. One late afternoon, our class held a small-town exhibit. I brought a few of my own pieces, both deeply nervous and painfully self-conscious. But when I saw them hanging proudly beside the others, I realized they held their own. A visitor lingered before my Woman in the Sea painting and asked quietly, "Who painted this?" I would very much like to buy it. I shook my head with a gentle smile. "I'm sorry, sir, this one isn't for sale. It's a personal reminder." He nodded, understanding. The story quickly made its way around the class. Marianne, our supportive teacher, hugged me and whispered, "Eleanor, you've completely found your season to bloom." That night, back home, I opened the windows to the ocean breeze. Moonlight laid a silver band across the water, perfectly mirroring the starry sky. I stood there a long time, feeling a peace I'd never tasted before. No more resentment, no more sting of betrayal, just a steady faith that life, even late, can still intensely blossom. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from Michael. The same long, desperate paragraphs, the same pleading tone, but this time my hand didn't shake to delete them. I left them alone, utterly calm. I'd said everything in our final face-to-face. I didn't owe him more explanations, and those bonds no longer held me. I set down my tea, picked up my brush, and painted a white flower opening in the night against a deep violet sky. A late bloom, but absolutely whole. And as I laid the final strokes, I knew I was painting my own heart. A heart scarred by deep hurt, yet patient enough to wait for its full bloom. I whispered as if to myself, my season has come late, but beautiful. Asterisk asterisk, I never imagined that at my age I could live an entirely different life. A life not revolving around corporate checks, strained family dinners, or being crushed by the weight of toxic responsibility. Now every morning I wake to watch the dawn pink the sea, to lift my brush and add another patch of color to my painting. I still vividly remember the day I dared to speak the truth at the wedding. It was the single most defining turning point of my entire life. For years, I let silence chain me. Let fear violently hold me down. But one brave moment set me free. Since then, I've understood. Truth can desperately hurt and cost you everything, but it's the only clean road to freedom. Michael. He still texts sometimes, occasionally calls. I don't avoid him, but I don't chase him either. I answer briefly, calmly. I show him that a mother's love remains, but reliance and exploitation do not. My son must learn to be a man, take responsibility, and build his own life. That's the only genuine gift I can leave him, and it's worth more than $22 million. As for Sabrina, she vanished from town after the wrecked wedding. I heard she moved to another state, living quietly. I'm neither angry nor pleased. I understand the harshest punishment didn't come from me. It came from the truth in daylight. Once the mask falls, no one truly believes the pretty words. That's the heaviest sentence. Some afternoons I sit on the porch and watch the whitecaps, thinking how far I've come. From a widow scraping to save every dollar for my child, to a mother betrayed by her son, to the woman who stood up and exposed it all. I lost plenty, but I found myself. And in the end, I'm grateful even for the losses. They brutally cleared a path to my real life. I'm not young, but I have my late bloom. My first paintings now hang in a small seaside shop. Not to make money, but to prove that age can't cage a creative spirit. Samuel drops by sometimes with a book or a new tube of paint, and we sit talking under the sunset. I don't call it late love, just companionship. And that, for me, is enough. If there's anything I want to tell those listening, it's this. Never think it's too late to start over. Truth may make you tremble, but once you speak it, your steps feel lighter. Don't wait for someone to hand you your worth. You can find it in your own hands, in your hobbies, in the small things your heart points to. I know many of you may be living with the fears I carried. Fear of losing affection, of being abandoned, of a family breaking if you stop sacrificing. But remember, real love is never built on taking advantage. Sometimes cutting a toxic tie is the only way to save yourself. And now, as I close my story, I want to say thank you. Thank you for staying, for walking with me through the dark, through the tremors, the tears, and the final smiles. Your presence, dear audience, proves that the story of an ordinary woman like me can still touch another heart. If you've known betrayal, dismissal, or being used, I hope you find a spark here to stand up. And if your days are peaceful, cherish them. They're priceless. I'll end with a warm ask. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Every story and experience deserves to be heard. If this journey meant something to you, tap like so. I know I'm not speaking into the void. And if you'd like to keep walking together, subscribe so we can meet again in other stories, ones about truth, courage, and the strength of our later years. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving me your precious time.